So my name's Graham Miller. I'm the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Science at the University of Surrey. More important for this, I'm a Professor of Sustainability and Business within the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. So I want to talk a little bit about my research, which is very much driven by trying to produce a more data-driven approach to sustainability. I'm interested in how we produce a more sustainable tourism industry. We're very good at producing numbers of jobs created by the tourism industry. We're very good at counting the number of tourist arrivals, where do tourists go, where do they come from. We're very good at assessing the levels of investment, but those are all financial measures. And what we don't have is a data on sustainability. So we don't know what the carbon emissions of the world's airlines are, cruise ships, hotels. We don't know how much water they use, how much waste they produce. So I'm really interested in knowing or trying to assess what those are in order that we can manage tourism in a more sustainable way in the future. So all of my research is really around trying to collect those pieces of evidence, and I'll maybe give an example of that. So if you think of tourism system as a bucket, we're trying to fill up the bucket, get as much benefit from tourism as possible. And there's been lots of stuff around tourism as an overcrowding places. Barcelona, Venice are good examples of that. But tourism leaks as well. So money goes into tourism economies, and then money will leak back out again. But we have no measure of how much money leaks out. Nobody knows how to measure these things. So if we can measure the leakage in some way, we may not need to fill up the bucket quite so much, because we'll retain more of the benefit from tourism. But at the moment we're not doing that, and that's what I'm keen to do. So I have a project called the Global Sustainable Tourism Dashboard with my colleague Professor Susanna Becken, who's at Griffith University in Australia, trying to collect evidence, big data sets from around the world to assess the impacts of the tourism industry. A few years ago we also designed for the European Union the European Tourism Indicator System, which was an attempt to measure to provide a set of measures that destinations around Europe would use to know when their tourism industry was sustainable or not, or where it was on that path to sustainability. And so we've got over 200 destinations signed up to that, using that system, and again beginning to collect some evidence of what their sustainability actually is. Another project that I'm involved with is as chair of a company called Considerate Hoteliers. So the company is a consultancy. It goes into hotel chains and we monitor what their resource consumption is. So we monitor how much energy they use, how much water they use, how much waste they produce, so that we can identify in a really specific way where they can cut their costs, cut their emissions in the most optimal way. And we've had some tremendous successes with those kind of really data-driven approach to consultancy. Another project that I run for the World Travel and Tourism Council, WTTC, I'm the lead judge for their Tourism for Tomorrow Awards. So every year we try to collect the best examples of sustainability from companies around the world. We produce 5 winners across different categories. And the reason I do that is because I'm very keen to be an academic that engages with industry. I don't want to be an academic that sits on the edge and criticises and complains and critiques and doesn't contribute anything positive. So I'm keen to press the industry more, to identify where improvement needs to be made. But where we have genuinely amazing examples, then that should be recognised. And that's why I take on this role as lead judge for the Tourism for Tomorrow Awards. And then the last of my projects is as co-editor of the Journal of Sustainable Tourism. So it's the leading academic journal for sustainable tourism in the field. And we publish cutting-edge papers on sustainability. So in that way, I try to get the academic perspective of sustainability, I get an industry perspective of sustainability, and I get very much a government public sector. So putting that all together allows me to try to drive forward sustainability in a data-driven, knowledge-informed kind of way, rather than just berating people or encouraging people to be more sustainable. So that's a broad description of my research. I'm very keen if I can get PhD students to come who are interested in those topics and really work with me in an applied empirical way to produce more data on sustainability. We've had some success at the European level, and again the European Tourism Indicator System was a response to that, to a government call at a European level to promote sustainability in the tourism industry. That has had effect on other countries. So Japan, for example, is picking that up now as an example. I know some of the states in Australia have picked this up as a system. So we are having an effect on it. I think it is also changing the context of the way that we make decisions and the way that sustainability needs to be more data-driven. But as yet in the UK, I couldn't point to a government policy and say we've had an impact on that particular piece of legislation. I started out my research thinking that the consumer was the most likely way to drive change in the tourism industry. I believed that if the consumer was interested in sustainability, they would demand that of the company, and then the company would respond to that market incentive. And there is some evidence of the consumer being interested in sustainability, but that only really works, I think, at the top end of consumers. And what we've not seen, both in tourism and indeed in other subjects, is that really coming down to the mass market. So the mass market who goes on holiday for 2 weeks to Spain is not particularly interested in sustainability. And that's fine. We explored that for a while. I think as a subject we explored that for a while. And now we've concluded that that's not the case. So if we want to see change, I think we need to look for leadership from government. I think we need to see leadership from industry. And that forces us to a different set of drivers. So how do I motivate government to introduce legislation that will be more pro-sustainability? So the problems, for example, of Barcelona or Venice are in large part because the governments of Barcelona and Venice have allowed cruise ships to come in or have allowed hotels to be built. That's what's produced the overcrowding. So there's a governance issue there. And then we need companies to respond in a more sustainable way. But of course, they're each individually only part of the problem and the solution. Having a bigger macro effect is down to government.